Hello, and welcome to yet another fraction multiplication lesson. This time we're going to take a fraction times a fraction. So in this case, both my multiplicand and my multiplier are fractions. And the problem that we are going to be doing is 2/3 times 3/4. So I'm taking 2/3 3/4 times. Another way of saying that is 3/4 of 2/3. So again, we are going to start by putting the multiplicand out on the floor or the rug or wherever you are going to be working on this. So in this case, I'm going to take my 2/3 out. Notice as before that I am using these lovely paper fraction materials. There are printable fraction materials on the in the remote learning folder on the Google Drive. So please take a look at that. So I'm going to start by taking 2/3. All right. Now 2/3, as you know, is not a whole. It is part of a whole. So I'm starting already with just part of a whole, 2/3. And now I'm going to take 3/4 of those 2/3. So if I take 3/4 of something, the first thing I have to do is break it into 4 pieces. So what am I going to break that into? Now, you can do some exploring, but I've already done that, so we're not going to do that in this lesson. And you know how to do that. And I happen to, because these printable fraction materials go all the way down to the tiniest little pieces, they go down to 20/4. So I've explored a little and I discovered that 1/3 is the same as 4/12. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take each one of these thirds and I'm going to break them into 4 pieces. And I know that those 4 pieces that I break them equally into are going to be 12ths. So there we go. That's 1/3. And it is now the same size, but it is broken into 4 pieces. You'll see why in just a moment. And I'm going to take my other third, and I'm also going to break that into 4 pieces. So I'm going to break it into 12ths, because I am taking 3/4 of each one of these parts of a whole. So I have to break it into 4 pieces so I can take 3 of those 4 pieces. So there we go. Remove my third and keep the same quantity, but again, it looks a little different. So now we have 2/3, but I've broken them each into 4 pieces. So I'm going to take 3/4 of each one of these 2/3. There we go, taking 3/4 of that 1/3 and 3/4 of that other third. And I see that my product is going to be 6/12. So I'm going to put that there. There we go. Now I know those of you watching this video are already telling me that I am not done yet. And you are right. Because looking at these 6/12 and knowing that it takes 12/12 to make a whole, I already know that I can simplify this. I can take this and I can make it into something bigger, which is a half. There we go. Yep, 12/12 is the same as 1/2. So take one of my other equal signs here. And I'm going to write that down. So 6/12 is the equivalent of 1/2. There we go. I did not take these. You see these 2/12 that are left over? I didn't take those because I only took 3/4 of each of my 2/3. So this is what I took, those 6/12 that became 1/2. So when I'm recording this, note cards I used for that last lesson, which, as I said, are not your best fraction tool. I'm going to do the same thing. I know that the first thing I did was I discovered that 3/4 of 2/3 is actually 6/12, and I can simplify that to 1/2. So make sure that you record all the steps so I know what you're doing. All right, so we also know that sometimes we don't have fraction materials handy. So another way to do this is to create a grid. So I'm going to use the denominator of my first fraction as the base of my rectangle. So, and I'm just using a ruler, so I'm going to do 3 inches. There we go. And if you're using graph paper, as you know, you've done this, you can also use the squares on the graph paper. The height is going to be the denominator of my second fraction. So in this case, I'm going to make a rectangle that has a base of 3 and a height of 4. Sure I get that somewhat right. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my rectangle into thirds because that was what I started with. I started with thirds. So there we go. My rectangle is now broken into thirds, but I don't have all of those thirds. So I'm going to cross out this one. So these are the thirds that I have, the ones that aren't crossed out. I have 2/3. And now I want to take some parts of that. So I'm leaving my whole rectangle there. I'm not erasing anything, so you can see the size of the pieces that I'm going to get in relation to the whole, because now I'm going to take parts of the parts that I had. So I am dividing the height of my rectangle into 4 sections, fourths. But I'm also not taking all of my fourths. So I'm going to cross out the fourths up here. There we go, cross those out. I'm only taking 3/4. Now, as you can see, my rectangle is now divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pieces. But I'm not taking all of them because I didn't start out with a whole, and then I didn't take all of the parts that I had. So I started out with 2/3, and then I took 3/4 of those 2/3. Never took the whole thing. And when I look at that, I see that I have 6/12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's actually what I'm taking of the whole. And that is the same thing that I got with the materials. And that is going to, once again, be simplified to 1/2. So that's how you can do it on paper. There's one more thing that you could do if you wanted to, which is to do the same thing and fold it. So I have this sheet of paper here. I'm going to fold my base into thirds. So this is a little tricky. You want to make sure it's all as even as you can get it. But then you can see the folds of your paper. Fourths are easier. So there you go. Now I've got 1, to 3 sections. I'll use that 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. There you go. And I'm going to cross out this third. So that's what I actually have, 2/3. And now I'm going to fold my whole into fourths, is folding it in half, and then folding it in half again. So much easier than the note cards that I used in my last lesson. All right, and now you can see that this has actually got 12 squares in it. There's 3 times 4 squares. And these sections, I'm going to just draw some very light lines there to show you that this is what I did. And I only took 3 of those. So I'm going to cross this out again. And took these squares, because this whole thing is divided into squares, are 12s. So I end up once again with 6 12s that are not crossed out on my whole sheet of paper. So there are many fun ways to multiply a fraction by a fraction. So feel free to give any of those a shot. And if you have any questions, please do let me know, and enjoy your fraction work this week.